starting again?
It didn't start. And it's just doing the countdown right now.
I think we're live.
Hi, sorry about that. I guess we didn't push the right button here, but we're on again. So
You're students, okay.
I'm Sue, and this is my husband Gary and our friend Tim.
Hello.
And most people watching this know that this is a broadcast to fulfill an assignment requirement. But not only are we going to do that tonight, I thought that I would invite Tim along, and Gary's here, and we're going to talk about some of Tim's experiences. He's been out of the States for a couple of years. I thought this would provide an opportunity for his friends and family to hear of some of his experiences. So that said, Tim, so what would you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences as you were traveling?
Okay. Well, I left the States about 22 months ago to go to India. So on the way there, I stopped in Egypt for 3 weeks to see the pyramids and go see the Nile, ride a felucca on the Nile, see some temples, and just kind of appreciate that ancient culture. So I spent 3 weeks there and then went on to India, where the previous year I had gone to try to start a low-cost water filter program, kind of a social business type of thing, to help people in the villages get clean drinking water. And so for the next 4 months, I traveled by train something around 10,000 miles from east to west and up into the north, introducing the filter to various pastors in different villages. My goal was that these pastors could become distributors and could go out into their communities and bring these filters and sell them and earn some income for themselves as well. That didn't work out quite as I had planned. Most of the pastors I met simply didn't have the finances to invest even $100 just to buy some filters at a wholesale cost to then resell. But there was one pastor, his name was Jitu, and he saw the filters and said, this is what the people need in the villages. And so he invited me to come with him. We spent about 8 days traveling together to some of the villages where he works. And during that time, we sold around 120 water filters. Later, he ordered more. And when I left India then in July or June of last year, I left my filter supply with him, and he kind of took over that project. So then in July, I guess it was, last year, I moved on to Thailand after several friends came over to India, and we traveled around some, you guys actually, and then you came with me to Thailand, and we traveled for several more weeks. After you returned to the States, then I began looking for an English teaching job, and eventually found one in Phuket, Thailand.
So I was just thinking of something, Tim, when you were talking about this pastor and the water filter program back, I think it was in June, no, would have been sometime in the fall. You contacted this pastor about, what was going on with the water filter program.
Yeah.
Do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, it was actually just last month. I was on Facebook, and this pastor started chatting with me and said, how you doing? I said, fine. And I hadn't heard from him in many months, and I just kind of assumed that the filter program had kind of, come to nothing. And I happened to ask him, I said, well, how's the filter program going? He was like, yeah, really good. During this monsoon season, I've sold more than 500 of the filters. And I said, really? Because I was absolutely shocked. And he went on to say that in the past year, he had sold about 1,000 of these filters. So when I left India last year, I felt quite discouraged because I felt like I had spent a lot of effort and hadn't seen many results, but this man had actually taken over and done a really good job with it. So that was one of the most encouraging things I've heard in a year or two. So yes.
So that's exciting.
You felt it was worth your time and all your efforts then. Yeah.
Looking back, it seems that it wasn't a waste of time. So that was very encouraging, for sure.
So you moved on to Thailand, and you got your teaching job. So how was that? You want to share your experience with that?
Okay. Well, I started teaching in a Thai government school. in their special English program. In the English program, they have about 15 to 20 native English-speaking teachers, and so the students have to pay a lot extra to be in this program, but nearly all of their classes are taught by native English speakers. So that obviously helps their English level to improve. It was quite a learning experience for me. I had taught English 6 years earlier at a language school, mostly one-on-one lessons. So this was a little different. There were typically about 25 students to a classroom, and I taught anywhere from the 7th to the 12th graders, and it varied from semester to semester. It was a good experience in many ways. It was frustrating in some ways. There's, of course, language differences and cultural differences, and just to try to get on the same page with administration could be a challenge, but I guess that's the case anywhere.
Well, always is.
Yes. But overall, no, it was a good experience. I think most teachers would agree that the reason they keep teaching is for the kids, and certainly interacting with them and relating with them, building that relationship was really encouraging, and I do think they learned some English along the way.
Well, that's a good thing.
That is
huh?
a good thing.
So, Tim, we've seen you interacting with kids in India. Last summer, privilege of watching you teach a couple of your classes. Did a super job with that. What do you think about kids, as far as maybe comparing them between American kids and Thai kids as far as certain attitudes towards maybe education? I don't know.
I think kids are probably kids
Right.
anywhere in the world, so there's a lot of similarities. You have some students who just love to learn, and they always do the assignments on time, and they do quality work, and they really want to get a high grade. And then you have others that just really couldn't care less, and they figure that it doesn't really matter whether they exert effort or not. And in the Thai system, there's kind of this rule that everyone has to pass, so that really doesn't provide a lot of motivation for some students.
So what do you do in free time?
Well, the room where I stayed had a swimming pool, or the guest house, which actually you
Quite lovely.
enjoyed for several weeks this past summer when you came over to
Yeah.
visit. So I spent some time there, but on weekends, since I was living in Phuket, which has around 36 beaches on that island, I sometimes would go to the beach. I really enjoy snorkeling and photography in general. So I would often, if the waves were calm, I would love to go to the ocean and do some snorkeling. Another nice thing about this job was that we would have a month vacation between school years. Now the Thai system is a little different from the American system, but their school year ends around March, and so we had 1 month paid holiday in April. And so for my holiday, instead of just hanging out on the tropical island, on the tropical island of Phuket, I decided to hang out on the tropical island of Borneo. And so I flew to Malaysia and visited, I guess, 3 national parks there. Met a British teenager who was crazy about snakes, and I had the opportunity of going with him and his father on some night hikes in the jungle, where we saw some snakes, we saw some crazy insects, chameleons, lizards, just all sorts of things, and I was able to get quite a few pictures from that. So that was a really enjoyable time.
So you were just back in Indonesia again. So what were you doing this time on your tropical island?
Okay, well, I finished teaching at Satri the end of September, and I thought before coming back to the States for the holidays, I should do a little traveling, take advantage of being in Southeast Asia and see some of Southeast Asia, so some more of Southeast Asia. So I flew to Sulawesi, Indonesia. It's that weird H-shaped island out in the middle of nowhere, and spent about 12 days snorkeling at the Bunaken National Park, Marine Park. It's a series of islands and has some of the highest concentration of different marine species, fish and other crazy critters that you would never imagine in the world. And so I loved it. It was amazing. During the month I was in Indonesia, I think I spent about 40 hours snorkeling, and I had bought an underwater camera, so I took something like 3,000 pictures underwater, some which actually turned out. If you take enough photos, you're guaranteed to get some good ones. So, but no, it was really good. So I spent several weeks in Sulawesi, and then I moved on to Bali for another couple weeks. I didn't do so much snorkeling there, but just kind of exploring the country. So, and for all those out there who would like to travel, Southeast Asia is a great travel destination. It's relatively inexpensive, and especially if you're based in a country like Thailand teaching English, there's some very reasonable airfares to some surrounding countries. So, just as an example, and I do tend to be, I'm a bit of a backpacker, I'm a budget traveler, so I don't stay in 5-star hotels. But
However, even when we were there,
yes,
for 13 nights,
yes,
it was only a little over $200.
yes, $20 a night, more or
And
less.
yes, and that was with a very nice room and a swimming pool,
Yes,
very nice accommodations,
Room
and of
service.
course a wonderful tour guide while we were there.
sure. Yeah, so there's some really good value over there. But just to say, if you're interested in the money side of things, my entire 1-month trip in Indonesia cost, including airfare, around $1,000. Now, some people would pay
Wow.
much more than that, but it is possible to travel very cheaply in Asia, Southeast Asia.
Sounds like a good place to go.
It does, and it's a lot warmer in Maine right now.
I was just saying last night, I wondered how you were doing with all the cold temperatures here, coming from summer
Yes,
to freezing.
yes. Well, I'm doing okay, but I stay indoors most of the time. And as you can see, I'm wearing, an extra shirt. But yeah, it's not too bad. Actually, after nearly 2 years away from Maine, away from the U.S., it's kind of nice to have a colder climate to come back to, and even some snow.
Mhm.
So it's good.
So, if someone were visiting Thailand,
Mhm.
where would you recommend they maybe start? I don't know. We liked both. I mean, I think one of my favorite places was Thai.
Mhm.
It was just a really quaint
Mm.
town and very friendly people.
Mhm.
What do you think? Where would you recommend?
I don't really like big cities, so I would avoid Bangkok or just spend a day or two there and then head out. Chiang Mai in the north is a very popular tourist destination, and we visited there last summer together. And then from there you can go up into the mountains like Pai, Mae Hong Son. A lot of the hill tribes people live up in the hills, so you can go trekking, you can go whitewater rafting if you want, but it's a fairly relaxed area to be. Phuket in the south is a little crazier, especially if you're in a place like Patong, which I try to avoid generally. But if you like beaches and nightlife, Phuket in southern Thailand is the place for you.
The street markets.
Some street
Yes.
markets, yeah. There's a weekend market, yeah, in Phuket as well, and a street market in Chiang Mai, the weekend walking market.
Mhm.
So,
Which I think was probably nicer than the one that we went to in Phuket. But anyway.
yeah.
So what next?
What next? Well, of course, I'm here for the holidays, so heading to Pennsylvania on Wednesday for Thanksgiving there with family. I plan to be in Maine with family for Christmas, and then right now I'm in the process of lining up a new job for next year, hopefully January. I've applied to teach for a school in Japan. I haven't heard back from them yet, and I may have to drop a few more applications, but my goal is to teach for maybe 1 or 2 years in Japan. My long-term goal, which very well may change, but what I'd like to do is spend a year or two teaching in one country and then move on to another and just kind of teach my way around the world a year at a time. Maybe hit Turkey eventually, and Eastern Europe and South America and the Middle East. We'll see, but that's kind of the dream.
So I was thinking the other night too, how many countries you had mentioned before this trip, how many countries you had gone to. At this point, what you count up to?
It's somewhere, I think 22 or 23 countries. I'm not sure I've quite hit the 24 number yet, but it's getting pretty close.
Do you have a favorite?
It's really hard to say. I really enjoy hiking, and Nepal is just an amazing country for trekking, photography, just amazing mountains and wildlife and bird life especially. But Thailand's a very convenient country. It's quite easy to get around. People are very friendly. So it's kind of hard to say, but each country is unique, has its own benefits.
Now, photography is a big thing to you.
Yes.
And I know you have a lot posted on Facebook.
Yes.
Is there any way, if anybody's watching this and wants to see some of your pictures, is there?
Well, I suppose you could become a friend on Facebook, which would give you unfettered access to the photos. So I guess you could just type in Timothy Myer, and if you see a little picture of a yellow box fish that looks like it's about to kiss you, that would be me. So otherwise, I guess you could, I don't know, contact Sue and she could hook you up.
Hook you up with it. Okay. So, is there anything else you want to share about some of your experiences?
Well, I guess one of the turning back the clock a little bit, but Egypt, spending 3 weeks in Egypt was a real highlight of this last trip. I enjoy history, and so to walk around the pyramids, see the Sphinx, just kind of appreciate the many thousands of years of history in that country. That was a highlight. And of course, the Nile. There's so many stories, and from baby Moses to whatever. So it was really good just to have several weeks just to kind of enjoy that country. Also, a highlight of that trip was Dahab, which is a small town on the Red Sea, or on the Gulf of Aqaba, I think. There's some incredible snorkeling there as well, and it's just a very nice place to relax. And then at the end of that trip, I had the opportunity of hiking Mount Sinai overnight, and enjoying a sunrise from its peak. So it's a highlight of that trip.
Good. So, being an adventurous sort of person, outside of Southeast Asia, where would you want to go?
I would really like to visit Turkey at some point. Some because of the history. I've heard great things about the people, the food, the culture. So that's certainly on the list. I've never been to South America, and there's also some countries there, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Argentina, and others I'm sure, that I think would be really, really good travel destinations.
So to those that would say, well, isn't it risky traveling here, traveling there? What would, because there's always a possibility, and like people say to Sue and I, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What would you say to those that are afraid to travel because something could happen? Yeah, what are your thoughts? What's your advice on that?
Well, the way I look at it, life is risky, and the only way to avoid that risk is to die. So, if you're gonna live, you're gonna have to take risks. It was interesting that my first trip to Asia, which was from 2000 to 2001, it was a 10-month trip, 6 countries. Right near the end of that trip, when I was in Thailand, 9/11 took place. And here I had been traveling for nearly 6 months. I don't believe I had had anything stolen during that time. I hadn't been physically harmed or anything in the 6 countries I had traveled in. And There may have been one incident in Thailand, but anyway. But generally speaking, I was safe. It wasn't a problem. And then 9/11 came along, and the whole world kind of stopped. And I remember emailing my mom afterwards and saying, "Is it safe to come home?" And I was safe in Thailand. There was, I didn't have to worry. But anywhere you are in the world can be dangerous.
Right.
And obviously, you have to be smart. You have to, take precautions. But the idea that the world is such a dangerous place and we just need to hide in our, behind our locked gates to avoid or to be safe, it's just not true. Most of the people I have met have been very friendly.
I remember talking about that when we were over there, because while we were in Thailand, and people had said, "You're going out of the country again." I always had people asking me questions and making comments, and what if you get sick, and what if this? But that was when the shooting happened in the movie theater.
Oh, okay.
I remember having that conversation and saying, well, you could go to the movies,
Yeah.
and something could happen to you.
Or you could be the Boston Marathon.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the benefits of traveling far outweigh the risks, just generally speaking. I wish that every high school graduate could take 3 months or 6 months or a year and go to a developing country and just, whether it's volunteer work, even just backpacking, just see that there's a bigger world than your own little town and your state and your country. See that there's other people that matter, other people who, they're trying to feed their family, they're trying to get an education, they're trying to do the exact same things that we are here. And in many cases, it's a lot more difficult for them. I think it's such a benefit to just learn about other people and other cultures, and to have your worldview expanded. I think it certainly changed my life and what I'm doing with my life. And I just think if people would have that experience when they're still maybe in their late teens or early 20s, it would really make them think about how their life is impacting the lives of other people around the world.
Well, I know that I had a chance to travel with you back.
8 years ago?
Well, it was more than that.
9 years?
About 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And up until that point, I just traveled in my imagination and through books and all of that. But traveling with you that summer, I know definitely changed my whole perspective. You learn things about yourself. You find out things you don't like.
Sure.
Just areas that you need to grow with your selfishness and all of that. So, to me, traveling is one of the best things you can do. And not to puff you up in front of your friends, but you're one of the people that I highly respect, and I think probably your travel experiences have really made you who you are as a person. So I can attest to the fact that traveling is one of the best things, and Tim is one of the best examples of that. Because when you're in situations where it's stressful, and yeah, we all struggle with our emotions and so forth, but through that we grow, and God does some really good things. So I've really appreciated my travel experiences, as has Sue, with you and not with you.
Sure.
Last summer when we were in just Germany and Switzerland just for a couple of days, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Just to interact with people that are different from you. And as Tim, you say, the reality is people are just people. Never have I felt threatened ever meeting or interacting with different people throughout the world. So
I should probably give a disclaimer too to the three of you who are watching. Well, hopefully, to those of you who are watching, if you do start traveling, it can kind of get in your system.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any cure for the travel bugs. So once you
not.
start traveling, you might just find it becomes a lifestyle. Sometimes people ask me, can't you just settle down in the States and just live a normal life and do what normal people do? And it's like, I can stay here for a little while, maybe a year, maybe 2, but then I know there's so much more out there, to experience and other countries. So it is really hard once you see that there's a bigger world than your own little world. it's kind of hard to just stay trapped in that little world.
So good. So do you have anything else you want to say before we'll let our audience go? We won't keep them here all night tonight. So
I think that's about it, unless you have any other questions.
no. So all right. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this, and thank you, audience, for joining us. And have a good night.
It's been a privilege.
Take care.